right, so we're outside now. We're looking at Sean's drum. Sean's got a barely used gateway here. It's nice and shiny. That'll change. But we're talking about his fire, and we've got a couple of notes here for Sean and probably for some of you guys at home. Remember that we are going to try and eliminate much of that drip as possible in the smoke. So we're going to set this up so that the fire basket is on the bottom. Obviously, we're going to put another rack in that's going to have our water pan in it, centered directly over the fire basket, and then we're going to put our brisket on the top rack over that, right? A couple of things that Sean was telling me about the way that he fires up his smoker is he's got this easy button or a fan, and fans are great additions. I used to run fans on my drums because it took out the factor of me having to watch the drums and manage that. As I started cooking more and more competitions, I think now we're up to like 18 or 20, I've gotten rid of the fans and eliminated the fans because they started failing on me, and the electronics failing in the middle of the cook is the last thing I wanted to deal with. So I just learned how to control my drum, and that'll come the more that you cook on it. You'll start to notice the velocity of the smoke coming out of the stack. You'll start to be able to put your hand on top, and regardless of what that temperature gauge says on the front, that can be wrong sometimes because as we travel down the road, those gauges get off. You'll be able to tell if your smoker is burning at the appropriate temperature. All right, so Sean's got his fire basket. He's got some lump charcoal loaded in there, and he's got some tumbleweeds or whatever fire starter of choice is. So I'm going to ask Sean to go ahead and get his basket fired up. And when Sean's setting this up, he's going to put those tumbleweeds right into the center of his basket. So he's going to put that right into the center of the drum there, or as close to center as you can get it. Perfect. Let's talk about what temperature we're going to start this thing at, right? We're going to burn this at 350 degrees to start, and we're going to do that until the brisket starts to set the bark on top, and then we're going to crank it back down to 300 until it reaches an internal temperature of 170, somewhere 170, 172 degrees is where we want to be before we wrap the brisket. What we have not talked about yet is wood, right? So we've got charcoal in here. What kind of wood are you using? Pecan wood. My man, perfect. Pecan is a great mild wood. It's going to give us some brisket a nice smoke flavor. We'll put the pecan in there just before we put the water pan in. So we'll let this get up, and we'll come back in once Sean's getting his pecan loaded in. Much trial and error here. Sean finally got this thing fired up. It's not bellowing smoke everywhere. So he's got his one chunk of pecan, the biggest chunk of pecan I've ever seen in my life. He's going to get that down in there.
Well, you got a knife in there cutting it.
And he's going to put his grate in. The grate is on the lowest rack. In the gateway drum, there are 3 different rack levels. We put that on the lowest rack, and then he's going to get a water pan in, and he's going to put that right over the top of the fire basket. Some more water. And then he's going to put his top grate on. We're going to set up his electronics to get this up to 350 degrees. He's going to put his lid on, and then we'll be ready to get the brisket on. Hopefully in less than an hour. Why do you have your exhaust over there?
Just because that's the way it was in my hand. There you go.
Why do you have it over here?
Because you made fun of me when it was over here.
How about we just do it like a normal person does it and just set it right down in the middle. All right, so the thing about gateway drum smokers, these are your intakes, right? So think about this as the accelerator in your car, right? So the more air you let in it, the faster it goes, the hotter the temp is, this is your exhaust. For gateway drums to work appropriately, you always want to make sure your exhaust is centered over the top. Although we've changed the way the gateway is functioning now, since you have a fan coming in this way, right, the exhaust needs to be on the opposite end of where your fan is. So you want to have it going here, right? If you were not running your fan system, you want to have it in the middle. If it is a windy day and you're noticing that you're getting a negative draft in your drum, then you can always shut down, and you don't have a fan system, you can shut down one of your exhaust systems or one of your intakes, and then just put the exhaust the opposite end of the other one that you have open to help you maintain temperature a little bit. Our brisket has rested. That looks good, man. For now being your first time, I think you're well on your way. But we've got our drum set up. It is settled in here. It's rolling between, what did you say, 346, 350? Yep, so it's right where we like it. So just as a recap, what we're going to do is we're going to put our brisket on the drum over the water pan. We're going to let it hang out at 350 until the bark starts to set. We'll talk about what that means a little bit. And then once that bark sets, we're going to back the drum back down to 300 degrees, and we're going to let it hang out there for a little bit as well. But we'll go over the notes about that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But now let's get this brisket on so that we can get the process started. All right, so Sean's had his brisket on here for about 30 minutes. It's time to get in and check, see how we're doing, and rotate it 1/4 of a turn. So pop it open. Let's see what we got. Oh, that looks awesome. It's looking absolutely perfect. I love the color on it. It looks good, and he's gonna just make that 1/4 of a turn. So perfect. And that's looking absolutely awesome. So we're just gonna let it continue to run here. It's you can obviously see that the bark is not setting on the brisket yet. So we're not at that point where we're ready to start backing down the temperature. We've been in here for about 2 hours. We've had the smoker running at about 350 degrees, which is about an hour longer than we normally did. But we figured out something with the bellows where we had to adjust the temperature on Sean's drum, which is the temperature that is measured on the thermometer, which I usually use is a bit cooler than what is measured on the grate. So we bumped up his drum temperature. We finally are getting things looking like we want, where the bark is starting to set nicely. So we're gonna spin it one more time. We're gonna bump down the temperature to 300 degrees, 325, because Sean's using an electronic device here, which is measuring the grate temp up at the top, just so that we keep the appropriate temperature here. We also probed it just a minute ago. It's at 162 degrees, so we're about 8 degrees away from being ready to wrap. So we're really getting into that range. But I'm gonna bring you guys in close so you can see what we've got going on here while Sean spins the drum. Okay, so the brisket is getting close to being ready to wrap here. So you have a couple of options. You could wrap it in a foil pan and use your wrap juice and just put the brisket in there in the foil pan and seal it up and put it back on the pit. I've actually, in the last couple of years, have gone to using a foil packet just because I don't want it to braise and I want to kind of preserve it a little bit of the integrity of the bark, and I feel like inside of that foil pan it steams it a little bit too much, and I'm not really a fan of the way that the finished product looks there. But you could go either way, but I'll show you this method and we can go from there. So we're going to make a foil packet here. I've got 2 long sheets of foil that I have just overlapped here, and I put that seam so it's towards the back there. And then I start at the back, fold it over, I don't know, what is that, probably like 2 inches or so. And then I fold it again. And then one more time, just to seal that end up. And then I turn it. Then I fold it over. Keeping that seam on the inside. And now you have this little ledge, right? So you can see what we're going to do here is we're just going to fold this little ledge over. So that's all the way over there. And then we're just going to roll that a couple more times too. So obviously now you just got a giant foil pouch and you just got to seal up the bottom of the table. And I'm sure there is a million different ways to make a foil pouch, but this is how I do it so I have success with it, right? So what we'll do is we'll slide the brisket in here, and it should hold all of our wrap juice in there, and then we'll put that back onto the blend. Pretty simple, right? Yep. We were just having a conversation about what is actually going to be the wrap juice. I keep mine pretty simple. I'm just using a beef broth and water, right? Sean has taken to this Cosmos brisket mop, which I've actually never tried before. And I mean, at the rate you're going, man, you should just be a Cosmos sponsored breakfast. Someday.
Let's see if they reach out.
And that's got some pretty good. Have you tasted this by itself before? That's got some pretty good flavor to it. It's got a little bit of heat in there. It's definitely got some Worcestershire sauce that's in there, and it doesn't really have much of a meat kick to it though. So I think it'll be pretty good. But what I would suggest is if you're using like a product like this, Cosmos Competition Brisket Mop, or maybe you're using the Butcher Brisket Mop, is to maybe use about 10 ounces of this and 2 ounces of water just to dilute it a little bit more. And if you're practicing your brisket at home, obviously this is going to impart some flavor on your brisket and to help to tenderize it, but you want to make sure that things are balanced. So you don't want this to overpower all of the stuff that you got going on there, and you certainly don't want to lose the taste of the beef, right? Because beef still needs to be the star of the show. So we'll start with 10 ounces of water, or 10 ounces of brisket mop and 2 ounces of water today. If we decide that it's got too much punch, then we will go back down. So we've got these little portion cups, which are 4-ounce portion cups. So if you fill that halfway with water, that'll be 2 ounces. Yep, that'll be good. Throw that in there. Pot. Yep.
You said 10?
Yep, 10. So 2 of those and then a half of one to give us 10. Always make sure that whatever I'm wrapping in is warm. I just don't throw cold wrap juice into your brisket because that's going to stall it, and that's not really what we're going for. We want it to kind of continue cooking. That's going to So with your braised liquid, these pots are really handy. Competition hack: you always have time at a Master Series competition in the morning after you get stuff on. Get yourself a insulated thermos like a Yeti or something. Make this ahead of time. Put it in there so when it comes time to do this, you got that going. Because inevitably you're gonna have brisket, you're gonna have pork going, you're gonna have chicken going. And these little small steps like this can save you some time later, and then you're not guessing about your measurements as well. I'd say you're probably about halfway there on that brisket, man. It smells amazing.
Yes.
Yep. You can see how it maintained that shape that we trimmed ahead of time pretty well. And that's because we took the time to round out the edges and we rounded off the bottom edges too as well. But over here, like you can see a little bit, it started to like, I don't know what the technical term is, but it started to push out a little bit. What I would normally do is, say if that happened along this entire edge, I would trim that off now and re-round the top of it with my scissors so that I can get back that nice rounded shape that we had before. Again, that's all just about presentation. If you forget about it, you might have to dock the edges at the end of the cook. But right now, the way that it is, it's not that egregious, so I'd probably just leave that as it is, right? We pick the brisket up here. And I'm gonna put this in here just so that we don't make a giant mess. But we're gonna slide that right into that foil package. Okay, just like so. And then you just wanna get your brisket mop. And yep, I'll just fold it up. Yep, and I'm only gonna put about 10 ounces of the brisket mop that's in here. Remember that we use 10 ounces of brisket mop and 2 ounces of water, which means that we got a total of 12 ounces. So I'm gonna leave about 2 ounces in the pan there, which is perfect. And you can just set that back down. And then all that you wanna do is just get this back as tight as possible against that brisket, just like so. Got it all wrapped up, it's in the pan, we didn't make a giant mess, kudos for that. So short of opening this up every time and checking the temperature of probing through the portal, we really don't know what's happening inside there, what temperature it is. And we know that usually cooking a prime brisket, it's gonna tender out somewhere between 200 and 220 degrees. It's probably gonna be a little bit, I'm gonna guess that today it's probably gonna be about 207 because we're cooking it hot and fast. So anytime we cook something hot and fast, the tender point is usually higher than that. So what I like to do, instead of having to open this and close it all the time, is I like to take a probe, right? Our point in, where we cut the point off, was this way. So I take my probe, spin this around to where the thinnest part of the flat was up here, and I take my probe and I get it in flat against here, and I push that all the way into there. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna plug this into the Signal ThermalWorks, or usually what I use is a chef alarm by ThermalWorks, and the reason that I like using a chef alarm is that this has a decimal point on the thermometer, so I can measure in precision what the temperature is, right? So we're gonna start paying very close attention to this brisket when it reaches 200 degrees. When it reaches 200 degrees, we're gonna take a timer and we're gonna see how quickly it increases in temperature. If it increases in temperature, like let's say it goes up by 1/10 of a degree every minute, we know that it's still cooking. If it reaches, let's say 205, or 205, let's just pick 205.2, and we notice that it isn't ticking up 1/10 of a degree anymore, and it's been, say, 7 minutes or so, then I know that what's happened is it's reached its second stall. And when it reaches its second stall, that means it's almost to the point where it has crossed the perfect threshold of being perfectly tender. So when we want to pull this brisket is as it comes out of that second stall. If we pull it too early, we're going to have a tight brisket, and that's probably going to get us 8s and 7s instead of 9s. If we're hunting for 9s and tenderness, we want to pull it as it's coming out of that second stall. Got questions?
Still talking.
It's a lot of information, and to be honest with you, this is what I spent all winter going, was tracking my briskets, because I was struggling with tenderness. And the last 2 comps that I have cooked, I've gotten 9s in appearance and 9s in tenderness. 8s in taste, but taste is more subjective than those other 2, especially in brisket. So, you know, I can make adjustments to taste from contest to contest, but I know and I'm confident that I have dialed in exactly where my tenderness needs to be, right? And the mileage is gonna vary based on the brisket you cook. If I were to be cooking a Snake River Farm black brisket, then that temperature is probably gonna jump up to 210, 209, 210, somewhere in there. On my A9 Wagyu briskets, the last one last week temped out at 211.7 degrees, right? Please ask questions. If you guys have questions, first hit the subscribe button, then drop me a note in the comments. All right, let's get this back up. We're settled in now. Obviously, we look real comfortable. Thanks, Sean, for bringing chairs. But to be honest, this is where I spend most of my time. Like between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, is sitting in a chair watching my brisket temp. So very true to competition day. But we're watching our thermometer here, and we see this has risen to 201.3, right? And we're just watching it to see when it stops rising, right? So right now we can see that it's flipping between 0.3 and 0.4, and you might be asking yourself from earlier, why is it important to know that decimal place, that tenth place? And that is because the difference between 201 and 202 could be the difference between you being way over tender and perfect. Being able to get it down to that 10th place is going to help us really dial in that temperature. So we're sitting here, we're hanging out, watching this, seeing when it hits that second stall, and as soon as we see that temperature isn't moving, right now it's been moving about a tenth of a degree every minute or so, which is still a pretty good pace, right? When it slows down and it's getting to about 3 minutes or so, we'll know it's getting closer. So we're just going to sit here, we're going to hang out, we're going to watch it, and then we'll take it inside and talk about finishing it up after we let it rest for probably about an hour or so. All right, so we have been locked up in this formation of 5, 6, 7. So this brisket has temped out at 209 degrees, far higher than I thought it would be. I think I was saying 205 or something like that, right? So we're at 209, but it's been locked in the same temperature pattern for about 2 minutes now, which we noticed is about 35 to 40 seconds longer than it was when it was moving consistently. So it's time to get in and check our brisket now, probe it. When you're probing it, Sean's gonna do the probing action here, we're looking to make sure, and we'll take that right out of there where it was, we're looking to check for the tenderness, not when it goes in, but when you pull the probe back out. When you pull your probe back out, you're looking to see that there is no resistance on the end of that probe. It should be like butter. There's resistance on there. And he's right, there's a little resistance left on there. So we'll get our probe back in there, and we'll let it keep rocking. Pattern since the last time it's slowed down. It's been about 5 minutes since it's moved a tenth of a degree, so I think we're probably ready, right in that zone where we want to check it again. So Sean's gonna get in there and we're gonna check and see if we are probe tender or not. Sean's got little girly hands. That looks tough. That still feels tough.
Go a long ways, it's tough.
No, I think we're done, buddy. Yeah, so that's the other thing is you have the temperature probe, that's a gauge, but you want to probe kind of around it to see where we are, right? So yeah, we might be in a fat seam right there too, but everywhere else you see that it feels pretty tender. So when he's putting that pin and he's pulling it back and he's not feeling any resistance on there, that's the indicator that it's done and it's ready to come off. So we're going to take this off. We're going to put it in our Cambro. We're going to let it hang out for about an hour or so. In competition settings, it might be about 2 hours. And then we'll slice it up and we'll show you guys how we're going to finish this up today. Brisket's been hanging out in the Cambro for 1 hour now. Competition, I shoot to have my brisket done at 10:30 and then turn in for competition briskets at 1:30. Don't forget that. You get 5 minutes either side of the window. If you don't make the window, you're disqualified. All the hard work you just done out the window. But we'll usually this happens at about 1:10 because I usually only need about 10 minutes to process my brisket, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the brisket out. We're gonna save our au jus. We're gonna put our au jus in here. And then in here, I've got some double strain Smoky Mountain, Blue Hog Smoky Mountain sauce. We're gonna add some of that to our sauce as well. Not too much because we don't want to sweeten up the au jus that we're gonna brush our brisket with too much. The other important thing that a lot of guys that first get into barbecue, and it took me a while to learn, is that you gotta finish your meat, right? And the way that you finish it is by applying a finishing dust. So the simplest way to make a finishing dust is just use the rubs that you already have on your brisket, so that way you're not introducing any additional flavors. So since we use the cow cover hot and the SPG, we're just gonna use 1 tablespoon of each, put them together, grind them down to a fine dust with a coarse grinder, and then we'll put them into a dredge and we'll be able to sprinkle a little bit of that on top. Get that guy open. Yep, and I'll hold the bottom of it here for you. And we're gonna try and conserve as much of that brisket mob as possible. So we're just gonna take that and pour it right in there. Awesome. We've both tasted this, and I think it's a little spicy. We gotta sweeten it up a little bit, and we might actually not even use the finishing dust today because there might be enough that's in there. What I suggest we do is slice our brisket, taste it, see where it's at, which you should be doing at a comp, and then make decisions based on that initial assessment. So let's get our brisket open here and get into it and see where we're at, and then we'll figure out how we're gonna finish it. It smells great. It's got a great aroma to it. I really like that. So the first thing I do, Sean, is I flip mine over, right? And then I come in with your knife and just cut that fat right off. Just like so. When you're slicing your brisket, just make sure you cut it on a bias, right? So put your knife at a 45 degrees, squeeze the sides of the brisket together, and then you just want to slice down this way, right? So, and then just one solid fluid motion so that you're not moving the corners. Let's pick it up here. I mean, she's got a pretty good bend to her. Maybe a little bit more, but the tenderness is gonna change, but we're gonna taste this piece to see where we're at. So you go ahead and grab a piece of that, pull it apart perfectly. A little peppery.
It's really to my liking.
It's to your liking, you like it.
I like it.
He likes it, ladies and gentlemen. Now we just gotta convince 6 random strangers to like it.
Yeah.
Let's put some sauce down on the top of it. Brush some sauce, and then set some sauce on it. Put it back on the grill for like 3 minutes and set some sauce on it.
Okay.
And then see where it goes from there. Three minutes on the rack, on the grill, it'll be good to go. Yep, there you go, buddy. All right, so you did try a little piece with the sauce. What did you think?
I thought with the sauce it was excellent.
It was excellent, and the tenderness is
Tenderness, I feel, is spot on.
is spot on. So, I mean, right now we're batting a 180, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But always remember in competition barbecue, if you don't like it, or if you think there's something that is missing, now is the time to fix it. Always leave yourself enough time at the end of a cook to make those adjustments, right? So make sure you're tasting your food frequently and make small adjustments. Don't go ahead and make wholesale changes, because you can make a great brisket horrible. And when in doubt, less is more, right?
Yes.
Less is always going to be more, because we're looking to make the best average barbecue possible. It doesn't have to be a home run. We just need it to be tender, and we need it to taste good, and we need it to look good. And right now, folks, I think 2 of those we've absolutely nailed. This is our brisket after it's been on the smoker for 3 minutes. It's got a nice mahogany color to it. It's got what I call a little bit of that fake bark. I think it looks absolutely perfect. So what we need to do here is we need to get, how many slices do you need in the box?
6.
6 at a minimum, 7 is great, 8 is preferable. So remember, the tenderness is probably going to change across this, right? I think that, to be honest with you, towards the front here was maybe just a touch tight, right? So I'm hoping that it's going to loosen up as you move backwards towards the brisket. So make sure you're just keep your knife at an angle and go ahead and slice that down and health it. So, you know, they always say about a pencil thickness, but I usually let the tenderness of the brisket as I work through it guide how I'm doing. So right there, I think that you're pretty good. And one thing I'm going to tell you about your knife skills here that I can see right away is start your knife kind of pointed down this way, and then draw back across kind of that way there. So that way you can get more of that slice off in one piece there. Yep, and there you go. Using that downward force of the knife that's on there.
Did it cut?
No, it didn't cut, but you'll get the motion of it. Make sure you keep it on the bias there. So before you keep going, steal that slice that's out of there, that second one in. Yep, discard that one. Oh man, Sean, I'm telling you, man, you made it delicious. Oh, we want to taste that one, and we want to test it for tenderness. So when you're testing it for tenderness, you want to see how it hangs, yes, but more importantly, you want to see if it is tight or if it's hard to pull apart. And I think that's perfect. Can you show that to the camera? Accordion is kind of going there. It's not really pulling apart. So, but you can pull it apart pretty easily if you wanted to, correct?
Yes.
Yep, so go ahead, pull it apart. Let's try it, see what we got. It is a little dry. What do you think about adding the au jus to it?
I don't know. I'm torn. No, that's too spicy for me. That's offensive.
You are correct. That's
offensive.
That could be offensive. So you might benefit from just using some straight beef broth to adjust that. Okay, so keep slicing there, bud. And remember, we didn't allow the injection to rest overnight. So the injection really didn't maximize. We didn't really get the maximum injection potential here. See here, if you're looking here, you remember I was talking about staining, and you can see kind of just right underneath of my thumb there, you have a bit of staining. And that has to do with some of the injection, some of the ingredients that was in the injection that Sean made today. When you're trying brisket recipes at home and you're testing brisket recipes, keep it simple. Try not to use ingredients that might stain your brisket. Your knife skills need some work, but Sean did an awesome job. If you guys are enjoying this video, if you learned something, make sure you hit that subscribe button for us. But we're gonna go ahead and finish this up here. I'm excited to see how he does at Minnesota in May.